Jacqueline lost the garage remote. Again. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would the loss of a glorified button trigger the unraveling of a marriage? But stick with me, because this story isn't really about a remote. It's about everything else it dragged out into the daylight. It was a Thursday, not a particularly dramatic Thursday. There were no eclipses, no plagues, no omens carved in toast. Just me, Austin, trying to pull into the garage after work and finding myself stuck outside like some kind of suburban Dracula, waiting for an invitation. Naturally, I called Jacqueline. No answer. I waited a bit, then texted something benign like, "Hey, garage remote's not in the car again. You around?" Still nothing. So, I sat in the driveway like a man whose entire fate rested on a 3-inch plastic rectangle. Eventually, I gave up, parked in the street, and walked inside using the front door like a peasant. There she was, Jacqueline, perched on the couch in our living room. Sorry, Conversation Nook, as she had recently rebranded it after one of her nesting phases. You know the kind, where your perfectly functional home suddenly needs an ottoman the color of cranberry mist, or else the energy will eat the walls. She didn't look up when I walked in. She was too focused on her laptop, her eyebrows doing that synchronized twitch they did when she was either reading something juicy or doing battle with an Excel sheet. Knowing Jacqueline, it could have gone either way. She's a marketing exec with a flair for dramatics and a deeply personal relationship with passive-aggressive fonts. I stood there, keys still in hand, and said with as much casual charm as I could muster, "Hey, you haven't seen the garage remote, have you? It's vanished again. Possibly joined a cult." She blinked at me, slow and deliberate, like a cat sizing up a coffee mug it's planning to knock off a counter. "I think I saw it in the laundry room," she replied, voice dipped in syrupy indifference. Laundry room, the Bermuda Triangle of misplaced household items. I hadn't stepped foot in there since the great bleach incident of last winter. But fine, I went. Now, this is where things take a turn. Because while the remote was not in the laundry room, or in the usual pile of misplaced sunglasses, novelty magnets, and assorted link goblins, I did find something else. Something not meant for my eyes. A box. Not hidden, exactly. Just misfiled. Tucked behind a stack of old towels we hadn't used since we accidentally hosted that dry-off Olympics with Jacqueline's yoga group. This box was matte white, shoebox size, no markings. Of course I opened it. This isn't a spy novel, and I'm not particularly noble. I thought it might be old photos, maybe keepsakes. Turns out, I was half right. It was filled with paper scraps. Notes, doodles, scribbled half-thoughts. A few were receipts, mostly from that new wine bar downtown. Nothing unusual there. But then I found a folded slip that read, "Wednesday, same place, same story. Try not to laugh when he says he still thinks I love him." I read it once. Then again. Now, sarcasm is my native language. I can interpret tone from a sticky note and read nuance in the scribble of a grocery list. But this wasn't nuance. This was a hit-and-run confession, dressed in the handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and dry erase meal plans. Still, I didn't leap to conclusions. I'm not a movie detective. I didn't start pinning red yarn across the dining room. I just sat with it. Let it simmer. Let it swirl. That night, over dinner, meatloaf and asparagus, nothing symbolic, I asked Jacqueline, "So, how was your Wednesday?" She barely looked up. "Busy. I had that strategy session with Lisa, remember?" Lisa, her work wife. Eternally exasperated. Lives off black coffee and unfinished projects. I nodded. "Yeah? You two get much strategizing done." She shrugged. "Some. Mostly complained about Gary. Gary is a spreadsheet with a tie." So I nodded again, chewed a piece of meatloaf, and filed that moment into a folder in my brain labeled, "Things that don't line up, but I'll smile anyway." The next few days passed like that, each one adding a drip to the slowly growing puddle of doubt. The text from Amila, who didn't exist in her contacts. The conference call that ran until midnight, but somehow featured laughter through the wall that didn't sound remotely corporate. The half-finished wine glass on the back patio that neither of us remembered pouring. Then came the charity auction. Now, Jacqueline is many things. Elegant, witty, occasionally terrifying with a glue gun. But charitable she is not. Not unless you count donating expired soup to the food drive and passive-aggressively judging the labels. So when she said she had to go help set up the silent auction for the downtown literacy thing, My eyebrows did the kind of workout they usually reserve for surprise family visits. You? Literacy. I read books, Austin. You read reviews of books. Or the backs of them. You're a cover connoisseur. She smiled in that way that says, I'm choosing to let you live, and left in a whirl of blazer and just enough perfume to suggest plausible deniability. She was gone for 6 hours. When she came back, she claimed she'd lost her phone charger, hence no updates. She was full of vague anecdotes about tablecloth mishaps and a guy named Trevor who nearly set a centerpiece on fire. I told her she smelled like someone else's cologne. She told me I was being paranoid. I told her Trevor didn't exist. She told me to go find the garage remote. We were back where we started. But here's the kicker, the garage remote? I did eventually find it. Wedged in the crack between the couch and that ridiculous velvet poof she insisted we needed for balance. And taped to the back of it, like some budget version of a spy thriller, was a business card. Embossed. Classy. Elliot Royce, independent event consultant. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were cheating on my husband, I'd probably avoid giving out my paramour's business card, especially one tucked into the cushions like a party favor. That's just poor form. So I Googled him and found a photo. You ever have one of those moments where the universe stops just to smack you in the face with irony? It was the guy from Jacqueline's college reunion photos. The one she said looked like a lab-grown Ken doll with too many teeth. Apparently, she changed her mind. Anyway, I haven't confronted her. Not directly. Because I want to see just how far she's willing to dig this little rabbit hole. How long she'll dance around the truth. I've been dropping hints, subtle ones, like setting the Wi-Fi password to Royce Knows Best and naming our home speaker Elliot. Nothing too aggressive. I'm giving her space. Rope, if you will. Not because I want revenge, but because I want her to say it without realizing I already know. Because this isn't about betrayal anymore. It's about observation. About timing. About waiting for the moment when all the little cracks she's tried to paint over finally split open. And maybe, just maybe, it all started with a missing garage remote. Stranger things have happened. The thing about discovering your wife might be cheating is that nobody hands you a user manual for how to behave when the clues are weird, inconsistent, and delivered with the subtlety of a failed magician pulling scarves out of a hat that's on fire. And the worst part? I wasn't even trying to find anything. It all just kept happening. Let's start with the book club. Now, to be perfectly clear, Jacqueline does not read books. She has a bookshelf, yes. A big one. It's decorative. It holds succulents, pottery, and a photo of her with a llama that she insists was a spiritual moment. But actual books? No. Not unless you count the one time she tried to get into adult coloring therapy and quit halfway through shading a mandala because it lacked narrative structure. So when she told me she was starting a weekly book club with her friends from work, my first thought was, who replaced my wife with this literate imposter? And my second was, I give it 3 weeks before they're just drinking wine and pretending to have read something. 3 weeks passed. No books appeared. No empty wine bottles. But she was religious about going. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m., like she was catching a flight to somewhere spiritually significant. Same outfit rotation, elevated casual, she called it. Like she was going to a panel on sustainable Instagram filters. One night, out of pure, stupid curiosity, I asked her what book they were reading. She blinked. Not a long blink. Just long enough to register that she had not prepared for this question. Oh, it's a memoir, she said. And then, as if recovering from a sneeze mid-sentence, added, by that chef. You know, the one who did the thing with truffle oil. She waved her hand like that cleared everything up. I nodded. Gordon Ramsay? No, not him. The other one. You mean Salt Bae? Her eyes narrowed. Don't be childish, Austin. It's serious. It's about his journey. Very emotional. And that was the end of that. Except it wasn't, because my curiosity had now upgraded to mild obsession. Not over whether she was cheating. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I cared yet. But because I was now stuck trying to figure out what she thought a chef's memoir had to do with a group of middle management marketing women who'd rather schedule meetings about meetings than cook anything more complex than boxed couscous. So I checked. Not her texts. I'm not that guy. But I may have looked at the group chat on the family iPad she kept leaving open. And by looked, I mean I may have spent a few minutes, fine, an hour, scrolling through a series of memes, emoji-only responses, and discussions about someone's boyfriend who apparently thinks almond milk is too spicy. but nothing about books. Instead, every Tuesday at 6:55 p.m., Jacqueline sent the same message to the group. Headed out. Wish me luck. Followed by a response from someone named Sabrina that said, go get him, tiger tigered. Now, look, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I've never needed a good luck wish to go discuss Chapter 7 of a memoir about infused olive oil. And I definitely never received a tiger emoji when I was headed to Costco. So I did what any reasonable man in denial would do. I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe go get him, tiger, was an inside joke. Maybe the book club had a mascot. Maybe they were weirdly competitive about literary analysis. I decided to let it go. Until the laundry thing happened. Again, not what you think. No lipstick-stained collar. No secret messages in pockets. Jacqueline would never be that sloppy. Instead, what tipped the scale was a single, oddly folded receipt that fell out of her jacket when I was moving clothes from the washer to the dryer, because apparently I lived to perform domestic acts of passive aggression. The receipt was from an art supply store. Not local. A town over. Not far, but also not near anything we frequent. The date? A Tuesday. The time? 7:16 p.m. And Jacqueline, the woman who thinks doodling is an illness and once called chalk an unpleasant texture for adults, had apparently purchased 3 tubes of oil paint, a sketch pad, and something labeled Graphite XL, Charcoal Burn Series. I stared at it like it might morph into an explanation. When she got home that night, I tried again. Book club go well. She shrugged, kicked off her shoes, and said, we didn't talk much about the book. Lots of deep sharing tonight. Emotional stuff. I nodded. Didn't get time to swing by the art store? Now, credit where it's due, Jacqueline recovered faster than a politician caught with an offshore account. Oh yeah? That was last week. I forgot to mention, I'm helping a friend with a project. He's doing a pop-up gallery thing and needed some supplies. I just picked them up for him. I gave her a long look. You bought him Graphite XL? She waved me off. Artists have their things. I don't ask questions. I don't know if it was the he that slipped in there or the way she pronounced pop-up like it physically hurt her, but I filed that one under suspicious but cannot be bothered to argue. A week later, I stumbled onto the final puzzle piece in a way that would have been funny if it weren't so annoying. My cousin Derek, who nobody in the family talks to unless it's Thanksgiving or we need a discount on drywall, sent me a message on social media. Now, Derek is not what you'd call subtle. His last 3 posts were about cryptocurrency, protein powder, and a poorly lit photo of a steak that looked like it had lost a fight with a truck tire. Anyway, Derek sends me a message that just says, yo, isn't this your wife? Attached is a screenshot of an Instagram story. There's Jacqueline, not doing anything scandalous, just sitting in a fold-out chair, holding a wine glass, watching a guy paint on a canvas the size of our garage door. But here's the thing, she's not at book club. She's at an outdoor painting event, with a bunch of people who look like they just discovered turtlenecks and French cinema. One of them, guess who, is Elliot Royce. Yes, the same Elliot Royce from the business card in the couch. There he is, sleeves rolled, brush in hand, making vague strokes on a canvas while 2 women giggle behind him like he's reinventing the concept of shading. Jacqueline is watching him with the kind of expression she usually reserves for compliments about her handwriting. No big kiss. No hand-holding. Nothing criminal. But the kind of scene where everyone involved is painfully aware of the unspoken tension and pretending it's not weird. I responded to Derek with a thumbs up and a cool. That's it. I wasn't going to have Derek be my therapist. So now I knew. Or I knew enough. Jacqueline wasn't going to confess. There wasn't going to be a tearful confrontation or a guilt-induced monologue. She was just going to keep playing the part of busy wife, Tuesday book club attendee, occasional paint courier, and I was supposed to applaud the performance. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next. I'm not a fan of drama. Or closure, apparently. But I did start making quiet notes. Every trip. Every receipt. Every Lisa said this. Or Gary from work that. I wasn't building a case. I just needed to see if she would ever tell the truth without being forced. Spoiler. She didn't. And that, more than the painting and the wine and the mysterious use of Graphite XL, is what really got to me. Not the betrayal. The silence. The confident, well-practiced silence. So now I sit in the living room, remote finally in hand, flipping through the channels with no intention of watching anything. Jacqueline is in the kitchen, on the phone, laughing too loudly. I don't know who she's talking to. but I've stopped assuming it's someone I know. There's a particular kind of comedy in having all the answers and still pretending to ask the questions. It's like being a game show host where you already know the contestant is going to lose, but you have to act surprised when they guess Nevada as a type of pasta. That was me. That was my role now. At this point, I had more than enough to connect the dots, draw a little stick figure beside them, and color it in with the graphite XL. She thought she'd sneak past me. But instead of lighting the fuse and marching into an argument about betrayal and morality, I opted for something more in line with my current philosophy. If you're going to go down, you might as well enjoy the commentary. So I picked a Tuesday, her sacred, untouchable book club day. She had just finished getting ready, which, for Jacqueline, meant looking like she was headed to a non-existent TED Talk on the role of sighing in modern relationships. Hair done, makeup like a mid-range political candidate, glasses perched just low enough on her nose to suggest she was too busy to be here. I waited until she grabbed her keys. Then, casually, like we were discussing a rerun of a mildly offensive sitcom, I said, "Hey, quick one before you go. What's the title of this week's book again?" She paused, just barely. Enough to know the question wasn't casual. But she smiled anyway. "It's called The Quiet Rebellion," she said, the words sliding out like she'd been practicing them on the drive home from wherever Elliot's brushstrokes had taken her last week. Ah, yes, the one by Darlene Finch. Of course. Huge fan. Loved her early work in tax law. She blinked. I blinked back. "Be safe," I added, with the kind of tone that said, "I know you're lying, but I'm not bored enough to stop you yet." She left with that smooth exit she'd mastered. Quick, efficient, just enough warmth to suggest everything was fine. The kind of exit you make when you're trying to get to a place where your spouse doesn't exist. I waited exactly 12 minutes, just long enough for her to feel safe. And then I made a phone call. "Hey, you still work with the city events board, right?" I asked my cousin Kelly. Kelly was not someone I typically called unless I needed a permit, a weirdly fast background check, or someone to explain why the recycling truck skipped our street. "I do," she replied cautiously, the way people do when they know you're leading them into a favor. "Cool. You guys doing any public art stuff this week?" I could hear the suspicion forming. "No, nothing new." "What?" "No reason. Just wondering if you're familiar with someone named Elliot Royce." Silence. "Didn't he get booted from that residency thing last year for painting live models without asking them first?" "Well, I was going to say he seemed charming." "Oh, he's charming," she replied. "Like a magician who only knows one trick and does it for the wrong crowd." That confirmed a few things. Jacqueline wasn't just having an affair. She was doing it with a guy who got kicked out of a community mural project for unauthorized body outlines. I thanked Kelly and hung up. That night, she came back exactly at 9:08 p.m. Right on schedule. Tuesdays were apparently predictable. She didn't look particularly happy or guilty, just tired in that performative way, like she needed me to believe that discussing a fake memoir by a fake chef had taken a toll on her spirit. "Good meeting?" I asked. She dropped her bag by the door. "It was intense. Lot of feelings." I nodded, like I too had spent the evening confronting emotions with strangers and cheese platters. The next day, I moved to phase 2 of my completely unnecessary strategy. Pretend I had joined a class. At breakfast, as she poked at her toast like it had personally offended her, I said, "I signed up for something." Her eyes lifted. "Oh, yeah, it's a workshop. Watercolor theory. Wednesdays." She stared at me. "You're doing art now? Why not? You said something about helping a friend with a gallery. Thought I'd get in on the action. Bond over pigment." She made a sound like a laugh trying to disguise itself as a cough. I smiled. "Maybe I'll run into this Elliot fellow." That got her. She didn't flinch, exactly. Just recalibrated. You could practically see the software in her brain doing an update. Elliot's not part of that. He's more installation-focused. I gave her an impressed nod. "Wow, sounds serious." She didn't ask another question. Neither did I. That weekend, I cleaned out the junk drawer. Not because I needed to, but because Jacqueline once said no man had ever voluntarily done it without a midlife crisis or a divorce on the table. I figured this counted as research. I found 6 expired coupons, a key to a lock we didn't own, 3 batteries of unknown status, and, underneath a stack of takeout menus, a folded piece of paper that looked far too crisp to belong in our archaeological dig of old receipts and mystery screws. It was a printed email. From Elliot. Subject, studio availability, next month. It wasn't romantic. In fact, it was barely coherent. But it included a calendar invite in the line. Let me know if Tuesday nights still work. I'll bring the wine again. Now, I know what you're thinking. Finally, proof. But honestly, it felt like finding a puzzle piece after you've already completed the picture. I left it where I found it. I didn't bring it up. I didn't quote it. I didn't wave it around like a prize at the county fair. I just waited. And then, one day, the confrontation came to me. She walked into the room holding her phone like it had personally ruined her life. "You've been using my laptop," she said flatly. "I have," I replied. "It's technically the house laptop." I didn't realize we were drawing territory lines. Her eyes narrowed. "Did you go through my stuff?" I searched for how to reset the Wi-Fi password and found 3 folders named tax stuff that only had 1 JPEG each. So yes, I clicked around. She crossed her arms. "That's a violation. Jacqueline, you've been attending a book club hosted by a man who signs emails with emojis. I think we're past violations." She paused. That long, infuriating pause where the other person is trying to decide whether to double down or pack up the circus. "You're being dramatic." "Not yet," I said, "but I can start monologuing if it helps you feel more grounded." There it was. That flicker in her face that said the game was up. Not because I had exposed some elaborate scheme, but because I had shown I didn't need her to admit anything. I had already moved past needing her side of the story. "What do you want, Austin? Right now? I want to know if Darlene Finch ever really wrote that book." She let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a threat. And then she left the room. No screaming. No crying. No breakdowns. Just silence. And me. Finally, just a guy with the garage remote, the truth, and no interest in watching her lie to fill the air. You know how some people react to betrayal by sobbing into throw pillows or writing vague poetry about broken trust and invisible bruises? Yeah, I wasn't that guy. I didn't take up running, I didn't start journaling, and I definitely didn't start growing herbs in the windowsill to heal. What I did instead was simpler. I got organized. Not emotionally. No, that ship was still adrift somewhere off the coast of denial. But logistically, I was thriving. Jacqueline still hadn't confessed to anything. In her mind, we were in the middle of some passive-aggressive cold front caused by my supposed emotional immaturity and her right to independent activities. Fine, let her think that. If she wanted to play subtle, I could do subtle too. I just preferred my version to come with spreadsheets and subtle sabotage. It started with the printer. Jacqueline's job required a lot of working from home. That meant long emails, PDFs, and the occasional desperate attempt to print documents 15 minutes before a Zoom call. The printer, which had worked fine for 3 years, suddenly started printing everything slightly off-center and only in Cyrillic. She blamed the drivers. I blamed user error. Try restarting it. I offered, sipping coffee like I hadn't replaced all the default settings with Russian system language and set every print to duplex against her wishes. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Revenge in a minor key. Next came the thermostat. Jacqueline had always insisted the house stay at exactly 72 degrees. Any deviation and she claimed to get headaches, mood swings, and a mysterious rash that, suspiciously, only appeared during conversations about dishes. So, of course, I reprogrammed the smart thermostat to run on a randomized cycle. Between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., the house would fluctuate between 67 and 75 in unpredictable waves. Every morning became a guessing game of, is it hot or am I dying? Followed by thermostat tapping and muttered threats toward the HVAC company. Meanwhile, I sat in my hoodie, pretending to be just as confused. Must be a firmware issue, I offered. Or ghosts. Small things. Harmless things. But they were adding up. She noticed the vacuum charging dock being slightly unplugged every few days. She noticed that her favorite bathrobe kept ending up in the dryer on high heat. She noticed that her Bluetooth speaker would randomly pair with my phone and start playing old boy band hits at 7:15 a.m. sharp. And through it all, she said nothing. That was the real magic trick. Neither of us said anything. It was like living in a polite war zone where the bullets were made of inconvenience, and both sides denied firing first. But then I went a step further. I created an online profile. Not for dating. I wasn't there yet. No, this was a Craigslist ad titled, Looking to donate full set of marketing textbooks, lightly used, emotionally heavy. In the description, I wrote, includes classics like The Art of Strategic Deflection, Gaslighting for Beginners, and Advanced Techniques in Pretending You Were at Book Club. Available for pickup in the evenings, except Tuesdays. We'll throw in a mostly empty bottle of white wine and a well-practiced fake laugh. I didn't post it under her name. I posted it under JR, listed our zip code, and waited. 3 days later, someone from her office sent her a screenshot. I only know this because she barged into the living room holding her phone like it owed her money. "Did you do this?" she asked, tone somewhere between fury and disbelief. I looked up from the crossword puzzle I wasn't actually doing. "Do what?" She shoved the phone in my face. "This. Someone thinks it's about me." I took a look. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it does sound familiar. I especially like the part about Tuesdays. That was oddly specific. She stared at me. "Austin." "Yes." "You're not funny. That's not what the guy who wants the textbook said. He offered $20 and a signed copy of his divorce paperwork." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a browser crashing. "I can't believe you're mocking me like this." "I'm not mocking. I'm marketing." According to Darlene Finch's core brand values, transparency and narrative consistency are critical for modern emotional alignment. She didn't laugh. She left the room and slammed a door, not hard enough to break anything, but just enough to let me know she was offended, confused, and probably Googling whether it was legally actionable. The next day, I booked a consultation with a moving service. Jacqueline wasn't getting kicked out. That would have been dramatic, and drama was her thing. I simply moved half my stuff into the guest room. Closet space. Bathroom items. A fresh set of towels folded neatly. No yelling. No tears. Just the quiet, unmistakable announcement that things had shifted. When she got home that night, she didn't ask anything. She just stood in the hallway looking at the closed guest room door like it had grown there overnight. Eventually, she said, "So you're staying in there now?" I shrugged. "Figured I'd give you space. You've been needing so much of it lately." She nodded. "Fine. Glad we agree." I didn't move out. I didn't file anything. I didn't even change the Netflix password. I just stopped pretending. We were now two people in the same house, playing out the last 5 minutes of a relationship that had technically already ended but refused to leave the stage. And still, she never admitted it. Not once. No apology. No confession. No attempt at explanation. That's what sealed it for me. Not the cheating. The fact that she thought she could outwit the slow unraveling I had planned. Jacqueline had developed a new hobby, pretending nothing was wrong. She took to it with such commitment. You'd think she was training for an Olympic-level denial event. I'd find her reorganizing kitchen drawers like it was a perfectly normal thing to do at 8:47 p.m. on a weekday. Or she'd ask if I wanted to go over paint samples for the upstairs hallway, despite the fact that I now lived in the guest room and hadn't commented on a wall color since 2016. Meanwhile, I'd been responding to every interaction with the energy of someone trapped in a corporate team-building seminar. Polite. Dry. Just helpful enough to avoid a full breakdown. Just passive enough to ensure she never felt like she'd won. The turning point came on a Sunday. We both happened to be in the living room at the same time, which hadn't occurred in weeks unless you count silently existing in the same house, like distant coworkers in an open office plan. She was sitting with her laptop, clicking around in that aimless way that's more about the clicking than the content. I was pretending to scroll through emails on my phone. I wasn't, obviously. I was scrolling through an article called "Things You Should Definitely Say in a Breakup If You're Petty But Don't Want to Get Sued." Then she said it. "Are you planning to stay in the guest room forever?" I looked up. "You make it sound like I'm on a spiritual retreat." She closed her laptop. "Seriously, what is this? We're just living like this now." I nodded thoughtfully. "Seems to be working. I haven't tripped over any of your shoes in 2 weeks, and the thermostat hasn't been touched since Tuesday. Frankly, I'd call it progress." She exhaled. The classic Jacqueline prelude to a speech. "Austin, come on. We can't keep doing this." I placed my phone face down and gave her my full attention. Not because I was excited for what was coming, but because I had waited for this conversation the way some people wait for the cable guy. You know it's going to happen eventually, and when it does, you're ready with a clipboard and a list of grievances. "You're right," I said. "We can't keep doing this. One of us needs to admit what this is." She blinked. "You mean you?" I smiled. "That's cute." "No. I mean you. But sure, I'll start. I stood up, walked to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and grabbed a manila envelope. Nothing dramatic. No grand reveal. Just slid it across the coffee table like I was handing over a quarterly report. What's this? She asked. Your file, I replied. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside, printouts, a few screenshots, the email from Elliot about studio nights, the receipt from the art store, a list of dates and times corresponding with her so-called book club. My notes. Thorough. Neat. Indexed because I had a lot of time on Tuesday nights. She flipped through them like she didn't know how to read anymore. Then, softly, like she was trying to see if I'd flinch, "You've been spying on me." I laughed. Jacqueline, if this is what you consider spying, you'd have a full-blown identity crisis using Google. She didn't respond. Just kept turning pages like she might find something that said, "Just kidding," at the bottom. I didn't cheat on you, she said. Oh, that's the line we're using? Okay. So Elliot is just your paint dealer. Tuesdays are for sketching. The wine was a communion ritual, and the gallery night photos were staged by deep-fake artists with a grudge. She set the envelope down. Why didn't you just ask me? I did. Do you remember Darlene Finch? Silence. Exactly. I didn't need you to confess. I just needed you to stop insulting both of us by pretending you were still deciding between the truth and whatever that was. Jacqueline sat back, arms crossed, like she was trying to hold herself together with negative posture. I didn't mean for it to happen. There it is, I muttered. What? That sentence. The one people say when they absolutely meant for something to happen and now regret the paperwork. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you being like this? Like what? Calm. Articulate. Not flipping furniture and screaming about betrayal like a daytime soap character. You're mocking me. Would you prefer silence? Because I've mastered that over the past few months. Turns out I'm excellent at emotional hibernation. She shifted, defensive now. You made me feel invisible. That's interesting. Because you spent the last year looking for the one man who could validate your existence through abstract oil, painting, and mutual dishonesty. That's not fair. Neither was the thermostat setting, but here we are. She stood, like she was preparing for a walkout. But there was nowhere to go. We were home. This was the scene of the crime. And there were no dramatic exits left. I want to fix this, she said. It was the only line that managed to throw me. Fix what? Us. The marriage. You don't even like me anymore, I replied. You like the idea of me. You like that I was stable and polite and always remembered the brand of almond milk you pretend to enjoy. But you haven't liked me in a long time. She didn't deny it. Which, frankly, was the most honest thing she'd done in 6 months. I don't hate you, she said. That's inspiring. I'll put it in my memoir. She didn't hate me, and other mediocre victories. She laughed. Quietly. It surprised both of us. Then she asked the only question that really mattered. So what happens now? I didn't pause. I'd been rehearsing this answer since the printer started acting up on purpose. I move out. You stay here. You can keep all the furniture you picked. I just want the guest room bed, the speaker, and the collection of petty observations I've been saving up for dinner parties. She looked down, not because she was sad, but because she had run out of comebacks. I'll have the paperwork drawn up, I added. No lawyers. Just signatures. No dramatic monologues. No discussions about closure. Just a clean break. And what do I tell people? I stood up, grabbed the envelope, and tapped the front. You can start with Darlene Finch. She deserves her own chapter. On the Monday after our last conversation, Jacqueline offered to make coffee. That was her version of an apology. Not words. Not emotion. Just the unspoken gesture of pouring caffeine into a cup and hoping the steam would fog over recent events. I let her do it. Not because I needed the coffee. I had already stopped drinking it since the machine developed a personality of its own, but because watching her do small things awkwardly had become my favorite genre of entertainment. We didn't speak much that morning. She went through the motions, and I let her. She poured herself a cup too, even though she never drank it. She liked the smell, claimed it helped her focus. Even though half her focus was usually spent remembering passwords, she insisted on writing in code. The legal part was easy. 1 visit to a notary, 2 signatures, and some quiet agreement on who got what. There were no arguments about division of property because, frankly, neither of us were emotionally attached to anything. The couch was replaceable. The bookshelves were purely decorative, and the toaster had become a shared enemy years ago after it started burning only one side of the bread, no matter what setting you used. I didn't tell my family right away, mostly because I wasn't in the mood for the kind of sympathetic head tilts that make you feel like you've been diagnosed with a personality flaw. My brother would have asked if I wanted to join his gym, as if divorce was a protein deficiency. My mother would have launched into a story about how she once left a man who wore too much cologne and somehow tied it to emotional resilience. I figured I'd give it a week. In the meantime, I began reacquainting myself with silence. Not the tense kind we had cultivated during the last 6 months of our marriage, but the actual silence that comes from being alone and not needing to perform small talk for the benefit of someone avoiding eye contact. It was refreshing. In the way vacuuming is refreshing, you don't enjoy the process, but you appreciate the result. One of the first things I did was unsync all the smart devices in the house. The thermostat, the lights, the speakers. Everything had been connected to her phone, and I didn't want to spend the next year accidentally listening to playlists titled Tuesday Mood, or having the hallway lights flicker on and off because someone in another zip code changed the settings. I factory reset my surroundings, one device at a time, and felt better every time something blinked goodbye. Jacqueline didn't put up a fight. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't cry, throw a scene, or show up at my new apartment with a symbolic gift and a rehearsed speech. She did what she always did: calculated, compartmentalized, and carried on. I heard from a mutual friend that she was still working at the same job, still attending events, still referencing authors who didn't exist. Apparently, she had mentioned something about going through a period of reflection, which I took to mean she had finally looked at herself in the mirror long enough to realize she wasn't as mysterious as she liked to think. Just inconsistent. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment not far from my old neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Neutral walls, decent floors, a balcony that faced a parking lot instead of a sunset. It was fine. And most importantly, it was mine. No surprise subscriptions, no unexplained packages labeled studio supplies, no notes written on the back of receipts with names I didn't recognize. The first night in the new place, I sat on the floor and listened to nothing. No fan humming, no dishwasher clanking, no passive-aggressive sighs from the hallway. Just the sound of a quiet apartment waiting to be filled with anything but Jacqueline. I didn't feel triumphant. That would have required more energy than I had. But I felt done. Fully, completely, unshakably done. And that, for someone who had spent an entire year decoding lies told in between errands, was better than any dramatic closure speech ever could be. Weeks passed. I got into the habit of walking in the mornings. Not to think, just to move. I'd pass the same dog walkers, the same old guy who watered his sidewalk for no reason, and the same teenage boy who practiced skateboard tricks and never landed one. Routine became therapy. Predictability became peace. One day, I ran into Sabrina. Yes, that's Sabrina, the emoji-using cheerleader from Jacqueline's group text. She didn't recognize me at first, but when she did, her face did that thing people do when they realize they know more about you than they should. "You look good," she said, which is universal code for "you don't look destroyed," and that confuses me. "Thanks," I replied. "You look like someone who knows too much and has questions they're afraid to ask." She laughed. "She told us you took it well." I did. Eventually, after the phase where I renamed the thermostat and staged passive-aggressive art attacks. She smiled, then hesitated. "Can I say something weird?" "Sure. That's my favorite category." "She misses the house," Sabrina said. "She said it doesn't feel the same without the arguing." Well, she should have labeled her drama before putting it in every drawer. Sabrina laughed again, but she looked sad this time. I didn't. I just nodded and kept walking. Back home, I sat on my couch, the one I picked, the one that hadn't been tested for compatibility with anyone else's opinions, and opened a notebook. Not for writing poetry. I'm not that broken. I just started making a list. Things I'd learned. If someone talks about finding themselves, they're usually looking in someone else's bed. Oil painting is not a personality. It's possible to be lonely in the same room as someone for a year without either of you noticing. You don't need a reason to leave. Just a decision. If your gut tells you something's off, it probably is. Unless it's about ghosts. Then maybe wait. The rest of the page stayed blank. I figured 5 lessons was enough for now. There was no big transformation. I didn't reinvent myself. I didn't take up pottery or start hiking or become a motivational speaker for recently divorced men who never got closure. I just woke up, made coffee, walked, worked, and breathed without waiting for someone to explain themselves. And when people eventually asked what happened, I told them the truth. We outgrew the habit of honesty. She pretended not to cheat. I pretended not to know. It got old. Most people nodded, awkwardly. A few offered stories of their own. Everyone moved on, including me. So that's it. That's the end. No dramatic twist. No redemptive kiss in the ring. Just one man, one rented apartment, and a whole lot of silence that finally meant something good. Jacqueline probably tells the story differently. Maybe in her version, I was distant, or boring, or too focused on smart home settings. And that's fine. People remember things however they need to justify what they did. But my version has better pacing, cleaner dialogue, and no fictional authors. And now that it's over, I can say one last thing with complete certainty. I never did find out what Graphite XL was for, and I'm okay with that. Subscribe to the channel